Let's talk about this game played between Stockfish 15 and Mittens 1 from chess.com. And Stockfish 15 is actually cloud-based server which has a strength of 3700, and it is basically from leeches. And Mittens 1 bot is from chess.com. As you know, this Mittens 1 is recently trending on the internet. So let's check the game. Before we check, in case if you are watching this channel for the first time, please consider subscribing to the channel and press the bell icon to get notified for the future videos. So here Stockfish with the white starts with the e4. Mittens 1 replies with the Sicilian defense, the aggressive way of handling e4. Knight f3, g6, the hyper accelerator variation, d4 and c takes d4, and after knight takes d4 we have bishop g7, and now comes the move c4. So Maraxi bind variation, this is called having a more control over the d5 square. It is very good for white setup. So knight c6 and we have bishop e3 defending d6, and now comes the move bishop e2. After knight f6, Stockfish plays the move knight c3 to simply defend it. And both Stockfish as well as Mittens bought castles, and now it plays the move pawn to h5. This is kind of an inaccurate move according to Stockfish analysis. It's because when you have the fianchetto setup, you don't want to weaken your king more, because you already have the dark square weaknesses around your king like this. And even people will try to exchange this specific g7 bishop to this e3 bishop, so that black will have some trouble on the dark squares. So in this case, you are already weakening so much squares on the king side. That is not good for you. That is why it says it's an inaccurate move. So in this position, it plays h3, just waiting to see what Mittens is going to do. So knight to d7, rerouting the knight, and then queen to d2, connecting the rooks. And in this position, interestingly, Mittens decided to take on d4, and after bishop takes d4, it even exchanges the dark square bishop itself. So queen takes d4, as you can see, the superiority of the Stockfish position, that is queen to d4, knight c3, and bishop e2. They are far more better than their inactive pieces, which is simply sitting on the first two ranks of black's camp. So here it plays queen b6, immediately striking with the tempo, and here Stockfish simply avoids the trade by putting the queen back to d2 square. Knight f6, back to f6, rook a d1, and now forming small battery thing on the semi-open file. Bishop e6, so attacking c4, and it also connected the rook now. So pawn b3 defending, queen c5, and here Stockfish plays the move queen c6. Excuse me, queen h6. So after queen h6, in this position, it plays queen e5, gaining some time on the knight, and the Stockfish simply drops the queen back to e3 to simply defend it. In this position, it plays queen c5 again, and at this point, I think Stockfish realizes that it is going to win the ending because of its space advantage, as well as the center control, and more importantly, I think control over the d file. So it decided to go for the ending now. So queenless middle game, and then the ending. So queen takes c5, d takes c5. So it simply kicks the knight around. So knight goes to d7, hitting the pawn, and now comes the move pawn to f4. And after rook f d8, Stockfish plays the move bishop f3. So putting the bishop into the logical diagonal where it attacks the b7 square. So rook a b8, the natural move. Rook to d2, trying to double it on the d file where it has the maximum control. So rook dc8, so getting out of the pin. So after this move, it plays the move rook to d1. So knight f8. After this, pawn to g4. And in this position, Stockfish realizes that it is far superior because of the space advantage and well positioned knight as well as the bishop. So it goes for the pawn break on the king side to attack the king. Pawn g4, h takes g4, h takes g4, and as you can see, now the h file is also open. At first sight, we thought, okay, these rooks are going to penetrate via the d file, but it is now h file now. Actually, these rooks are going to be shifted to the h file to attack the king. So let's see, a6, and then it plays rook g2. The threat is obvious, pawn f5, and then g takes f, and then g takes f. There is this discovery and winning the bishop. So it plays the move rook e8. In case if the knight wants to go somewhere, the bishop has to drop back to c8, and that's why it vacates the rook to f8. Excuse me, e8. So f5, and then bishop d7, and now comes the move king f2. So the king has been improved, as well as it is running toward the center, and it paves the way for the other rook to join the attack, so via the h file. So pawn b5, and in this position it completely ignores and plays the move knight to d5. And this knight is not just it is not like it is just putting the knight into the center. It is actually coming with a great threat, The threat is actually knight to f6. Why it's a threat? Because pawn takes, f6 is a great pawn in the black's camp, and g7 is under control. Rook h1 and rook h2 followed by checkmate. It's a simple idea, and that's why in this position, Mittens decided to attack the knight, which is centralized. So rook h2, the plan is very simple. So it takes the knight, he takes d5. After this move, rook b d8 in this position, and the Stockfish is really adamant about the f6 square, and it plays the brilliant move, that is pawn to d6. The idea is very simple. When the knight was there on the d5 square, the plan was to sacrifice the knight on f6 square. Similarly, we are going to, the Stockfish is going to, deflect the e7 pawn to d6 square, and then we'll be able to push the pawn to f6. That's the point of playing d6. So e takes d6, and now comes the move f6. And at this point, actually, Mitten started crying and commenting something like this. So g5, the paving the way for the knight, so that you can meet the doubling the rooks on the h file. So rook d h1, knight g6, stopping the mating idea. Rook h7 anyways, getting into the 7th rank. Rook takes e5, rook g7 check. After king f8, now comes the move rook h7. So doubled on the 7th rank now, and the f7 is threatened, and Mitten plays the rook d7, and that is the simple tactical move, that is rook takes g6. After f takes g6, Mitten loses the rook, and now Stockfish is completely winning, and it is piece up. And as you can see, the king is already in a danger position, like it is just trapped on the 8th rank. So rook e6 trying to attack the pawn, rook d8 check, forcing the king to the light square, and wins the rook like this. So bishop d5, king f6, and then bishop takes e6, king takes e6, rook e8 check. It's a fine game. After this, it's just a winning ending. Even beginner can win this ending. It's very simple. So king d5, king e3, a5, and then rook a8, pawn c4, rook takes a5, king c5, a4, c takes b3, rook takes b5 check, king c4, king d2. It's not a threat actually, b3 is not a big deal. So anyway, king d2, d5, rook b8, king to d4, a5, king e5, and then a6, king f4, a7, b2, and a8 queens, and then pawn to d4, king d3, b1 queens, and in this position simply takes, rook takes b1, king e5, and then rook b6, king f4. And you see this pattern is already mate in 3 actually, but sometimes we will not be able to find it, even it is very obvious. So it simply cuts up the king's escape square and leaves only one square to go to, and that is king f4. And after this move, it plays queen to g2, and it protects the pawn, and also it forces the king to only one square that is available, king e5, and then it delivers mate on e4 square. So that's how a Stockfish simply crushed the Mitten's bot, and it started crying. So this is what it is actually. The strength of the Mitten is it's not it's not a like other engines like Leela Chess 0 or Alpha 0, or it is not like that. It is definitely better than most of the masters available out there, but it is not stronger than the current generation engines or the neural based engines or whatever available. So even if you pair or many games against these two, like a Stockfish versus Mittens or Mitten versus Stockfish, vice versa in black piece or white piece or whatever it is, still I think Mitten is going to get beaten like this. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a thumbs up. Still, if you're not subscribed to my YouTube channel Chess Visor, please consider subscribing to the channel, and don't forget to check the channel for previous videos and playlist. As usual, this is Chess Visor, your wise choice to improve your chess.